Joe Thomas in the morning here at the Democratic National Convention with Senator Mark Warner, who's watched his partner in the U.S. Senate head off to be vice president. Terry McAuliffe just announcing new Secretary of Education, and Holton is going to be focusing on the campaign trail as well. Mark, what was your first reaction when you heard that Tim was officially going to be the vice presidential nominee?
Well, Tim called me last Friday night, and he told me he left a message. We didn't talk, but that he'd been chosen. I couldn't be more proud. I've known Tim since law school. We've worked together in our public lives in Virginia for 30 years. I can't think of anybody I'd rather have as a partner, somebody that I would trust more, somebody who'd be better about. He has my back, I have his, and he'll have Hillary's back going forward. And at the end of the day, somebody who's just plain decent. And Lord knows, in politics in America today, Joe, we could use a lot more decent people.
Well, let's go there since you opened the can of worms. Since the question was raised over the weekend, thanks to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and the emails from the DNC, I think transparency has been the buzzword. If there's the word of 2016, now we're seeing it on the internal political side of the Democratic Party. A, how does the Democratic Party heal from it? And B, is this a concern going forward as a member of the Democratic Party? That it has to heal for the faith of your constituents?
Well, Joe, what I'd say is I was concerned when I heard about this, and I think the former chair of the DNC did the right thing by stepping down. But I tell you what concerns me more, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, who hacked into these files? Where did it come from? I've not had any briefing yet, but we have a pretty good ability to be able to search back on computer hacks and find their source. I, again, remember FBI Director Comey when he said there are two types of companies in America. One, those who know they've been hacked by the Chinese, and those who've been hacked by the Chinese and don't know it. Yep. And I've seen some of these published reports that this hack might have originated out of Russia. Now, I'm not going to jump to any conclusion until this investigation takes place. But if this proves to be the case, what would be obviously a country that we're pretty adversarial with, trying to interfere in our domestic politics, that would be of enormous concern. And on a bigger note, let me just also add this. It raises the issue that cybersecurity is going to be one of the growing issues going forward. And this is going to be government and the private sector. Last year we lost $130 billion of people's personal information, intellectual property hacked into. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. Matter of fact, the senator from Colorado, Republican senator, and I have started the cybersecurity caucus. We've got to get this right on a going forward basis.
Well, beyond that, though, certainly the Democratic Party has for many years portrayed as the blue collar, the everyman's party, and doesn't this sort of really give a hit to that image?
Joe, I would actually beg to disagree. We've still got a party that talks about how we're going to make sure there's economic opportunity for all Americans. How do we make sure that we recognize, and I say this as a former business guy, spent longer in business, as you know, we've talked about that before, than in politics, but there's something fundamentally challenged with American capitalism right now, where we see the vast majority of corporate profits, 95% in the last quarter, used for stock buybacks, not for reinvesting in jobs in America or building plant and equipment. I think Bernie Sanders touched on that. I think it's also part of the thing that motivates some of the Trump voters. And I think at the end of the day, which has been the party about economic opportunity going forward and that actually leans into the future, I think I'll take the Democrats any day of the week, particularly when we saw so many of my Republican senator friends not even show up in Cleveland last week, and we saw out of Donald Trump, this constant, rhetoric of fear, but not a lot of optimism about where our country heads.
Last one, you said businessman. You certainly, in your business world, you're much more focused on economic freedom and taxation, tax issues. You've always portrayed as a more conservative Democrat in your representation as well. Does the move to the left, the Sanders impact on the platform and all of those things concern you as a Democrat, and perhaps even look further into the future? Do we see a third party emerging?
Well, Joe, I am a strong believer in our free enterprise system, and I can read a balance sheet. But I also recognize that when we see that activist investors come into great companies in America and say, I'm only interested in what happens over the next quarter or two as opposed to long-term value creation. When we see 95% of corporate profits in the last quarter being used for stock buyback buybacks not creating better value. I think there's a lot of concern from the business community as well that we got to make our free enterprise system work for a broader group of people. Well, we've talked before, Joe, about the fact that changing nature of our workforce. Literally a third of American workers today don't work in a traditional 40-hour-a-week job. It's part-time or independent consultants. We're going to have to remake the social contract that was created in the 1930s and 1940s for things about unemployment and health care and retirement in a way, I believe, that's going to be more portable going forward with this changing nature of our workforce. I think these are issues that pro-business Democrats, as well as Sanders supporters, and quite honestly, some Trump supporters as well, ought to be concerned about. Where they fit on the liberal-conservative continuum, I'll let you make that judgment, but I think at the end of the day, it's future past, and Democrats have been at their best when they've been about the future.
Do you wonder, outside left, outside right, and then the inside or middle becoming three parties?
I don't think either party has got a monopoly on truth or patriotism or virtue.
Oh, I didn't say that.
But I still think every time that we've seen these strains in our history in the past, one party or the other has grown to take on these new challenging issues. My hope going forward will still be the Democratic Party, but I frankly think our country is governed better when we have two parties fighting over the center rather than fighting over the extremes.
And as long as we're transparent.
As long as we're transparent. Amen to that.
All right. Thank you. Mark Warner on Joe Thomas in the Morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good rest of the evening. Thank you, sir.